Those are the 5 things: recover cash, engineer wealth, accelerate investment income, scale revenue, and make it count. Economic independence is the factor. Doesn't matter your age, 60 years old, 50 years old, 40, 30, 20. It's all about economic independence. Get assets that create cash flow. Money can be complicated. Let a nerd help you. We're here to demystify the complex nature of money by getting you answers from financial nerds and whiz kids. Welcome to Ask the Money Nerds, a weekly segment of the Wealth Labs podcast where we answer your most pressing money questions. Getting this question quite a bit. Hey, I'm too old. Hey, I'm too young. Hey, I've got a late start. Like, we're going to go through and dispel the money myths about age. And look, maybe if you're totally retired, yeah, there's some definite challenges as far as expanding your means at that point. But I'm excited to address this because it doesn't really matter your age. There's certain fundamental principles, processes, and really methodologies that if you employ are going to work regardless. There's certain advantages being younger. There's other advantages of being older. So we'll discern through and kind of sift through to help empower people. So Chief of Staff Stolba, Ask the Money Nerds, here we go.
Let's do it.
I look super intense. I was like, here we go. Like, that was crazy. Yeah. You didn't even, you're just used to me being intense. It doesn't even bother you anymore.
Okay, William is writing in today.
Nice.
He says, I've just recently started to absorb your videos on YouTube, and all I can say is I wish I started sooner. I just turned 50. Congrats on that.
Hey, I'm 41 at this time, so not that far behind.
Yeah, I won't say my age.
35.
Yes, I am 35. So he just turned 50 in the last year, and I just now started to really become interested in personal wealth. Let me say, yes, I'm an idiot. You're not an idiot, William. We don't believe that.
I've made plenty of financial mistakes. That's how I figured this.
Haven't we all, right?
Very expensive things.
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, I haven't been surrounded by the most financially savvy people. I've begun my journey in real estate investing, taking baby steps towards building my portfolio. I'm still an employee, but have had my eyes open to the benefits of becoming an entrepreneur. Could you do a video for us older students that have gotten a late start? I believe there's a huge number of us out there that would benefit. Please continue putting out amazing content. Thanks for that, William.
Regardless of your age, let me go through the things to do no matter what age.
Yes.
Set up a wealth capture account. Mm-hmm. This is a checking, savings, money market to build liquidity. You want 6 months of liquidity, 6 months of savings set aside for your personal expenses. Mm-hmm. That gives you staying power. It gives you more peace of mind. And you just want to automate paying yourself first.
Yeah, it's a game changer.
Every paycheck, I don't care if it's Social Security. I don't even care if it's a student loan. You want to get in the habit. The amount doesn't matter. The habit does. Okay. The second thing is learning about cash flow banking as a way to boost that wealth capture account, to move it to more of like a wealth creation account than just capturing it. So it's more of a midterm strategy to boost that. Once again, even if you're older, you're going to get a lot less death benefit, but you could still enhance your cash value with what's called paid up additions or PUAs. I always want people to invest in their skill sets. Thinking that I graduated from school, now I've got my education. Nope, you didn't get your education. You got part of the process. Mm-hmm. Be a lifelong learner.
Yeah, I think that's a good differentiator is there's a difference between schooling and education.
Okay.
Schooling is, the 4 years you go to college, the 2-year trade school. Education is lifelong. It's consistent. It's over the course of many, many years.
Yeah, I'm in like an self-discovery unlearning phase right now. Mm-hmm. Like, what are the bad habits? What were the false beliefs? What are the things holding back? Like, and just allowing more. But there was a time where it was all about the financial IQ, 26 straight months flying somewhere and interviewing people in my early 20s. And I still am always looking to learn there, right?
Yeah.
With the other money nerds kind of schooling me on what's going on and updating me and reading. Definitely that's still happening, but there's a certain amount of foundation that's been built there.
Yeah.
So investing in yourself, definitely the next piece, whatever that means with developing your skill sets, expanding your means where you can create more value out there. And I don't think age matters. We've seen that with technology and the internet. It's made that less of a race, culture, where you're born. I get it. Third world countries with poor internet, still pretty complicated, still difficult to get ahead. I was just in Guatemala, and what amazing people that I met there, very entrepreneurial, but definitely, haven't quite expanded beyond their own little areas to a certain degree. So I get that there's, challenges that way. But for more of the population than ever before, the playing field has been leveled, right? It's the gap is closing in some ways, and in other ways it's widening. Where it's widening is there's more of a wealth gap now than ever. Really rich people accounting for so much of the wealth with so few people, and then a lot of people that are kind of stuck in a middle class type of place. And a lot of it's because of the narrative and the I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm too this, I'm too that. And we've got to get to the core of value creation. How do we deliver more value? How do we impact more people? How do we more deeply impact those people that we reach? This is a huge key for that. So once we've got the foundation I just talked about, then it's about economic independence. And this is a process that's 10 years or less. It's most of the time 3 to 7 years. So economic independence is recovering cash. So plug the leaks. Are you overpaying tax, overpaying interest, overpaying on investment fees that don't perform, or overpaying on insurance costs that don't protect? Then the second thing is engineering wealth. What is the number that you have to get every month to cover your basics? Let's generate cash flow to get there. Is it paying things off? Is it building things up? Then the third one is taking all assets and rather than accumulating, which at 50, compound interest isn't going to do you a lot of good because you got to wait all the way till you're 80 to really get the benefits of it fully. So instead, we're going to focus on cash flow over accumulation. So that's accelerating investment income. Then fourth is scaling revenue. So whether you're a business owner and you grow that business or whether you're an individual that works in an organization that you get upside potential through whether that's bonuses, whether that's incentives, whether that's specific projects that when they hit completion, you get more money. You've got to have that upside potential where you're not just trading time for dollars in today's economy. And then the fifth one is to make it count. It's investing back into yourself. It's having quality of life along the way. Those are the 5 things: recover cash, engineer wealth, accelerate investment income, scale revenue, and make it count. Economic independence is the factor. Doesn't matter your age, 60 years old, 50 years old, 40, 30, 20. It's all about economic independence. Get assets that create cash flow. The notion of financial planning being overly emphasizing retirement planning and setting money aside for 30 years is the problem. That's kind of the antagonist of the story. That's kind of the villain when it comes down to it.
So how does someone go about finding their economic independence number?
Look at your basic financial situation, right? What are your utilities? What's your rent or what's your mortgage? What are the basic things as far as food and shelter? And then when you have that number, that's your economic independence number, how much you have to have every month. Now can you reduce that number because you pay a loan off, right? So that lowers the bar in a good way.
Yeah.
Or could you invest that creates more cash flow to get there? So for some people, they've got to look at their investment index. Their investment index is they take how much they deposit into an investment, right? And so they take however much that is, and then they divide the total amount.
Should we map it out on the iPad so they can see it?
So the investment index is simply... Investment index is how much have you put into an account divided by how much cash flow or how much payment comes to you.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people have no cash flow coming from their investments because they've been trained to be accumulation investors rather than cash flow investors. So that's why we want to accelerate investment income. And what we want is we want a really low number. So a low number here would be 50 or less. That is a cash cow, just kicking off tons of cash flow. If it's 50 to 100, that's cash flow strong. If it's greater than 100, well, we want to get better cash flow from the allocation of your money. Some people do this extraordinarily well with real estate. Others buy businesses and do it really well. Others are more passive and maybe they invest in real estate funds or they invest in dividend paying stocks or they do, I see people that use options trading in order to create cash flow. You've got to find what works for you. For me, I've mentioned over and over, it's really intellectual property and creating those recurring revenues from everything from selling books to having the coaching programs at Wealth Factory that support people in the implementation. But ultimately, we also want to know your cash flow index, right? Which is more when you've borrowed money. So how much did you borrow divided by how much you have to pay per month? And what you want on that is a high number. Here, you're the one that's giving your money out to get cash flow. There, you're borrowing money. So
you're thinking opposite here.
Exactly. When you're the bank, you want a really low cash flow index because it means there's a lot of cash flow coming into you for not giving a whole bunch of money, and you're in the game of cash flow. If you're an investor, you want a really low investment index because it means you didn't have to put a lot of capital out there to create a very powerful cash flow. Now, an example would be if someone's been paying on their mortgage for a really long time and maybe they only have 3 years left, but it's been an amortized loan over 15 years or 30 years. Maybe they've been paying extra on it. they probably have a really low cash flow index on that, less than 50. So if they were to pay that off, let's say it only took $30,000 and it saved $1,500 a month. That is a big return. Imagine taking $30,000 and creating $1,500 a month. That's going to be hard to invest $30,000 to create that same cash flow. So we're just looking at how to manage cash flow. Engineering wealth is finding what your number is and then finding ways to create that cash flow. Accelerating investment income is saying, where do you have existing resources that you can start creating that cash flow? I've seen people use their credit, and they've helped other investors buy real estate, and they get paid a percentage of the real estate deal or monthly cash flow for using their credit. So that's a resource to be more resourceful with. I've seen people do a 72T distribution on their 401ks, which starts to give them monthly cash flow now without the 10% penalty. So that becomes a cash flowing asset versus an accumulation asset. Or obviously people do real estate and they rent it out with single family, duplexes, fourplexes, commercial property that is cash flow positive. That's another example, right? But you got to look, are you better paying something off because you have a low cash flow index, or do you have a low investment index, which means you have a really good cash flow where you're putting money in? Like you said, it's the opposite. You want a high cash flow index and a low investment index, right? That's the deal.
Makes sense. One thing that you said earlier about compound interest.
Right.
I think there are a lot of assumptions about what compound interest is and how it may benefit us. Do you want to speak a little more to maybe the myths of compound interest and clarify what that really means?
Compound interest feeds this formula that people believe that wealth is a function of money times rate times time, which is how much money can you put in? And it's the notion of it takes money to make money. That's what people who want your money, that's what they tell you.
Yeah.
Stova. Takes money to make money. So yeah, if you put more money in, you'll have more in the future. Well, okay, of course. Rate. How do most people try to get a higher rate of return? They take more risk, but higher risk equals a higher chance of loss. So now they're adding more money, they're taking more risk, and then they're told, hey, compound interest is a 30-year or longer proposition, because if we look at a compound interest curve, it's kind of this curve that's slow initially, then it gains steam the 10 to 20 years, but then 20 to 30, it gets that hockey stick, that exponential curve. So it's always something kind of out there. Well, the institutions selling compound interest are actually compounding cash flow. They're focused on cash flow. So if you go to a bank and they say, great, we're going to give you 2%, you'll see a sign for like a savings account or maybe a money market or a CD, right, at 2%. And then you'll see a sign over here that says, oh, we've got a mortgage for 4%. Well, that looks like, oh, that's not a big spread, but they're renting your money for $2, right, per year for your $100. Over here, they're selling $100 for $4 a year, right? Well, the reality is that's 100% markup. That's 100% return. If I can pay $2 to get $4 back, that's 100% return. That is an amazing rate of return. On the other side of that is, if I'm only earning 2%, but I'm paying 4%, well, if I cash out my 2% account and pay off the 4% account, that's 100% improvement. So that's why we want to look at the cash flow index versus the investment index, because this is really, finance 101, but understanding this is essential. And what I want to cover here is what's called cost of money.
Yeah.
Your cost of money is either the highest interest that you're paying on something, or, so it's either what you're paying or what you're earning. So what can you safely, sustainably earn on your money? Some people might get 10, 20, 30% 1 year on an investment or on their business, but that's probably not something you're going to get for 30 years. So it's got to be sustainable. So let's say you knew you could earn 4 or 5%, right? But right now you're paying a 10% interest rate on a credit card. Well, paying something off is a much higher priority at that point.
Yeah.
Right?
And some credit cards I've seen are like 20,
22,
26, 28.
Hard to beat that rate of return. So every time you don't pay that off, that dollar is costing you $1.22, because it's your opportunity cost. What that dollar could have saved you. See, there's always an interest cost, whether you pay cash and you forfeit the right to earn interest, or whether you borrow and you pay interest. Either way, there's an interest cost. We know when we borrow, we pay interest. That's the obvious one.
Yeah.
The less obvious one is, oh, I'm forfeiting the right to earn interest. That's opportunity cost. So cost of money is your highest net sustainable rate of return, or your highest net sustainable cost. So you've got to really understand that to know and make personal finance personal. So Should I borrow? Should I pay cash? Well, first off, what's the peace of mind? If you borrow and it's something you've borrowed to consume, you're going to go into debt. Never borrow to consume.
Yeah.
If you borrow to acquire an asset that's creating cash flow, make sure you know how to manage that asset, or otherwise that could become destructive. But understand your cost of money to know whether how you manage all this, and whether you pay off a mortgage. If you're only paying 2% because you're on an introductory rate for a few years and it's an adjustable, but you're earning 4%, that's a pretty good situation. But if you're paying, if you're paying 5% and you're only earning 3%, you're going in the wrong direction there. So it's very personal. That's why it's hard to just hear people say, you should always get rid of your mortgage and pay extra every single month to it. Or you should never pay off your mortgage and you should get the maximum tax deduction. Who's right? Well, it depends.
Yeah.
Who are you? How do you relate to the mortgage? How do these things operate and work? So, learn your investment index on all your investments, learn your cash flow index on all your loans. Understand that this notion of wealth equals money times rate times time is very limiting. It's what I would call the accumulation philosophy. What I believe in is the velocity or cash flow philosophy. So if we look at velocity, that's how we kind of measure how often the money circulates in a given year in the economy. That's just the GDP divided by the money supply. So GDP, gross domestic product, that's essentially our output, divided by how much money is in circulation, which is our input. Now, if they just print more money, it doesn't necessarily increase the GDP, right? It could actually lower it because it inflates, right?
Yeah.
Or if they, so if someone says just take more risk, that's a new input. Or save more money, that's a new input. So the question is, how do you keep your input fixed and increase your output? Well, it's through velocity. Cash flow creates velocity, keeping your money in motion. Being efficient, plugging financial leaks. That keeps more of your money without having to work harder or scrimp or save or sacrifice. Or most importantly, scale. How do you increase your output by being more strategic with your initiatives and what you do to deliver value, right? Through technology or automation or, delegation.
Yeah. So one of the things this person wrote in and was talking about real estate investing. They're starting to get into that.
Right.
So how do you go about acquiring assets, and maybe I don't think responsible is the right word, but how someone's into real estate, how do you go about doing it without really putting so much risk into it? I know you have a friend who wrote a book about, buy then build, right?
Yep.
Can you speak to that a little bit? I think it would be
helpful. So in real estate, the first thing I would look for is, how do you make money on the buy? So an example that I lucked into where I made money on the buy is one of my friends, Joe, called me and he said, hey, I've got a friend that is not making his house payments, but there's a lot of equity. At the time, there was $90,000 of equity on basically a $280,000 home. So he's risking losing it and going to foreclosure. So I came in and I bought it. We used my wife's credit, no money down. We bought the property, and then he started making the payments to us while he lived in it. But he worked on his credit over the next year, and then he bought it out. And we were just going to split the equity at the time that he bought it out because I helped save it. So I actually walked away with $90,000, and he walked away with $90,000 because the market was so hot at the time, right? Wow. That's making money on the buy. There's already equity there because of a distressed situation, a distressed seller. We did another Ask the Money Nerds question where someone's got a bunch of equity in their home, like 40% equity in their home, but they can't qualify for a loan. That might be an example, right? Where they could,
for sure.
So how can you make money on the buy? Some people do it because they know if they just, improve some amenities, maybe they improve the master bath, maybe they improve the entryway, maybe they improve the kitchen, that they immediately know someone's going to find more value in that, right? Yeah. So some people are good at the fix and flip, and there's formulas and there's software that are just really effective. It's competitive, but know what you're doing. So how can you make money on the buy? The second way you make money on the buy is at cash flow positive from day one. How can you buy it and it's already cash flowing the day that you get it?
What kind of situation would allow a property to cash flow from day one?
The right rental agreements, right? For a commercial property. So there's already lease agreements, and, obviously that's going to drive the price up because in commercial, they look at the cap rate, which has to do with the rents versus what you purchase. Okay. And so obviously people know what they're willing to buy based upon that. Let's say that you went and you bought a 30-plex, okay? But it was just zoned as a 30-plex. But then what you do is you build it that each unit could be individually sold. So it's not, and then you go to your tenants, and maybe 30% of them want to buy that unit, and all you had to do is make some modifications for it in order to qualify for financing, and all of a sudden, okay, you've got a great situation because you could sell that, refinance, have a loan at a place where everyone else, or you could even sell or finance to your tenants, which might mean they make a down payment. You're the bank. They're paying a higher payment because now they're building equity and you're the lender.
Wow.
So these are just a few examples of what you might be able to do. Or maybe you have a really great property and you make it a corporate retreat. And all of a sudden you're renting that for short term. See, because when you rent something for 12 months, it's going to be a much lower monthly payment than, let's say, we're close to Park City right now. During Sundance, you can really rent for high during that week because of the demand, right? Or during ski season, when it's a great winter like it is this winter, you can rent for a lot more for those short terms rather than, and now it's more work because there's more turnover and there's more management, but that could be a big boost in cash flow as well. So you make money on the buy because of a distressed situation, or you know what you're buying that someone else didn't know, or maybe it's someone's now deceased and it's part of an estate and they're just trying to, move quickly and get their cash. Like the cabin, that's what happened here with this cabin. It's cash flow positive because you have the right renters, or you fractionalize the ownership and now you've got 8 different owners and they're all leasing it out. There's so many options there.
Yeah, I have to say I'm learning a lot.
Yeah.
I know my investor DNA is not real estate, but this is exciting stuff.
Yeah, so make money on the buy, be really cash flow positive. And this is what I would say. You have some type of due diligence team or formula, and you have to look at a lot of deals. So if you're going to get in real estate, treat it like a business, not like a hobby.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to be with really competitive, intelligent people that have software and have teams, and that they'll pass up on a ton of deals to find the right deal. So if you're patient, you're looking at enough deal flow, you're going to be a lot better off. And so, I'm a instructor for some of the real estate programs out there, and you'll just see there's so many things to do in real estate, from lease negotiations to lease options to seller financing to auctions to, commercial property to residential to vacation rentals. But don't try to be an expert in all those things. Find what it works for you.
Find your lane and stick with it.
And you could be a little bit more passive and get involved in real estate syndications where you're an investor, or REITs, real estate investment trusts, where you're just, buying into a fund, but you'll have less control. And those don't always go according to plan, so you better be really clear about it, or the really good ones may not pay as high of a return unless you're a very wealthy family and part of the accredited, investor type of arena. But, there's active and there's passive, and, there's a lot of difference in how much time it's going to take. All right, you asked, we've answered. So keep bringing your questions, askthemoneynerds.com. Chief of Staff Stolba, Garrett Gunderson, coming your way.